Why, hello, YouTube. It's been a long time. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is, a series of ideas. The first one in the line is something I've talked about before, which is the analogical. This is in contrast to the analytical, which is something like math and science, philosophy, the end product of those, let's say, not the things themselves, not the process, but the end product. For many scientific and mathematical processes use analogical reasoning, but their end products, as we generally know them, are analytical. And the easiest way to identify the analytical is it's usually a data point connected to a data point, connected to a data point, connected to a data point, in a linear fashion. The analogical is more like transparent, overlapping webs of information. We could even go beyond the three-dimensional and call them fourth-dimensional. This also strongly relates to Ian McGilchrist's notions of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and how those interact to form flow states, and the fact that both art and reason require both hemispheres, but each hemisphere dominates in a certain area. For instance, the analytical or the analogical. The drilling down into something so specific you can finally grip it and hold it, versus zooming out to see the large picture. All right, so concept one, the analogical. Now, the analogical allows us to begin building second topic, which is, you could alternate calling this the hyper object or the tesseract. There might be nuances in those two concepts. However, for now, I'm just speaking broadly enough to speak of them as the same, which is to say, a hyperobject is something that is so interconnected. It is, if you will, the interconnection of all things in a person's knowledge base, in an organized, systemic fashion. Now, in an analytic way, you could spend your entire lifetime trying to build a hyperobject and never get it done. But with the analogical, you can begin using metaphor and symbolism and these transparent stacking structures that can hold multiple objects. You know, one of the indicators you're in the analytical is if you define something and you're referencing one specific meaning of the term, whereas if you are not merely looking in the dictionary and saying, oh, here's your three definitions, that's not quite it. It goes beyond definitions to being like a thing. So the metaphor comes to mind. I once heard of somebody describing in literature a line where somebody shoveled another man out the door. That creates this visceral experience of the event, and yet literally that is ridiculous, right? He didn't take a shovel and pick him up by the shovel and dig a hole with him as he threw him out the door. And yet you seem to get closer to the reality by speaking of shoveling him out than you would if you simply said he threw him out, because he probably didn't even throw him out, right? Even that's an analogy. He ushered him to the door in an aggressive manner in order to get rid of him quickly because of the disgust and frustration he had. Suppose you could say something like that. What begins to happen when you look at all your analogical reasoning and create an architecture of structure for it, and use that to be the superstructure between all your analytical data points, is you slowly begin to build a hyperobject. Tesseract is another term we use, me and my partners in rebel thinking, I suppose you could say, in that we, it is the idea of a tesseract being so large, so multidimensional. We're not simply, when we use the term tesseract, we mean it in an analogical way. We don't mean literally a cube with a fourth dimension. We mean something that you can never see all at once. There are so many dimensions to it that you could turn it and turn it and turn it, and a new dimension of it would continuously come into view. This is the nature of the hyperobject, and it is what the analytical allows us to do. Third concept is what we like to call the amoeba. The amoeba is the idea of, when you learn, how do I say this? When you have a facility, an attitude towards things that is humble enough to absorb any other position, perhaps, adjust so that you can fully absorb it, but then the idea being that you are willing to, and you are aiming at absorbing any other position that, and this is perhaps very important because you can't absorb everything, but that which sparks with you, that which resonates, that which has some significance, which you judge to be well worth your time. This is the amoeba. But another aspect of amoebas is, of course, they infect other things. So our ambition as a group of people attempting to create the tesseract using analogical language is that we may continue to absorb all other subjects which are capable, are capable of aiming at the continual building out of the hyperobject. Furthermore, our hope is that the value of this process will be so evident to others that they too will begin to want to engage in this absorption. Many of the people we are aiming to usher into our project are individuals that already have their own projects, that are in some ways trying to build some aspect of the hyperobject, because they see how divided everyone is, and they see the problems of meaning and understanding of knowledge, and how there's a meaning crisis, as it is called in some areas of the internet, where we don't know who to believe and we don't know what the meaning of our life is, and there's this crisis to the meaning of things. The hyperobject is an attempt at distilling down all things while encompassing them on their analytical level as well. And the notion of the amoeba is, I will absorb your project, but try this. See if absorbing this from us, accepting the infection, if you will, strengthens and upgrades your own project. In so doing, the hyperobject continues to grow and spread and increase in scope, not only in its knowledge, but in its user base. And with that, I guess I would the only other thing I'll add to this is that within these concepts, once you begin using with these concepts, certain ethical assumptions begin to rise up. Things like humility, things like mutual respect. I probably will do another series, another video on those very soon. But for now, I will bring this one to a halt. Thank you for your time.